Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening around the world. My name is Blackjack. Welcome back to the channel. Today we have another comment section build for you. As always, if you're interested in having me put together a deck for you and make a video for the channel, leave your commander, your budget, any restrictions you have, theme, pet cards. I'll put it together, I'll make a video of it, and hopefully give you some inspiration and some new ideas before you decide to do it yourself. So, today we have a request from user Chalin on YouTube. They said, my request is no budget restriction, mid to high tier, Bello Bard of the Brambles beatdown. I was really excited to build this deck. I think it turned out really cool. We decided, or I should say I decided, to go with a heavy stacks theme. Stacks is not often a deck that I put together or a deck that I play at most tables, but Chalin is a personal friend of mine, and I know that they don't have a stacks deck, and I know that they've never played one before, so I wanted to give them a little bit of a fresh take on a commander that I haven't seen played very often. So let's get started. This is Bello, Bard of the Brambles. During your turn, each non-equipment artifact and non-aura enchantment you controlled mana value 4 or greater turns into a 4/4 elemental creature with indestructible and haste, and whenever they deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So, it goes without saying this deck is going to be very thematic as far as enchantment synergies, but it's also going to do a good job of constraining the rest of the table in their options and their ability to interact. We're playing all of the good enchantments you'd expect, all of the good card draw stuff like Argothian Enchantress. Expensive, but it does have Shroud, and whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you draw a card. Composer of Spring is Constellation, which means whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you can put a land on the battlefield tapped. And then if you have 6 or more enchantments, you can actually put a creature or a land on the battlefield tapped. Destiny Spinner makes our enchantments uncounterable. Eidolon draws cards. Archaeomancer makes stuff cheaper. Herald of the Pantheon makes stuff cheaper. We have Nylea, God of the Hunt, as a cool way to not only be an enchantment, which is synergistic, but Bello is also gonna, I believe, turn this into a creature because it is a non-aura enchantment, so it's gonna wake this up without having to have devotion. So it's gonna give all of our other creatures trample, and then we can have a mana dump or a mana sink to buff up creatures as well. We have both of the overlords from one of the newer sets. So the cool thing about these overlords is instead of paying the full 6 mana for this overlord, you're going to pay 4 to cast it with its impending cost, and then you're still going to be able to wake it up with Bello. So it's essentially a 4 mana spell. So for 4 mana, we get to enter and attack to deal 4 damage to any target. So if you on turn 3 play Bello, turn 4 play Overlord, this is going to get to deal 4 damage to any target, and then Bello's going to turn it into a 5/5 indestructible haste creature. It's going to get to immediately attack, deal 4 more damage to any target, and then draw us a card. Absolutely insane in this deck. Overlord, same thing. For 3 mana, we're going to get a 6/5 that when it enters or it taps, we get to make a land that is every basic land type. Obviously, being every basic land type's not really important, but creating a lot of lands for that little of a mana cost and having a 6/5 indestructible, hasty card draw enchantment is hard to beat. Sakura Tribe Elder, let's get this out of the way. The ramp package is always Sakura Tribe Elder, Cultivate, Farseek, Kodama's Reach, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth, 3 Visits, Arcane Signet, Felwar Stone, Soul Rain, 10 up, 10 down, and all your base green decks. Put this ramp package in and it is going to make your games more consistent. Sanctum Weaver, very good at ramping us quickly because we're going to have a lot of enchantments out. Setessan Champion is card draw. Verduran Enchantments is card draw. And finally Xenagos, which again, the devotion we can ignore because Bellos is just going to wake him up. So this is going to be an indestructible 6/5 that gives creatures a huge bump in power and toughness whenever it attacks. Or, sorry, at the beginning of combat. Sorceries, we don't play a ton. We are playing a heavy package of artifacts and enchantments, but we do have some in here. We have Balaged Recovery. We have Blasphemous Act for board wipe. Remember that a lot of our creatures are going to be enchantments, and a lot of those enchantments are going to be indestructible. So playing stuff like Blasphemous Act and Chain Reaction are going to be incredible ways to wipe the board, but still not have it affect our board. So it's going to be more of a one-sided board wipe. Decimate, hard to argue with the value of this card in any red-green deck. You get to get a 4 for 1, so I usually put it in all of my red-green decks. Jeska's Will, extremely powerful in any base red deck. Being able to get our commander out quickly for 3 mana, and then add a ton of red mana and exile cards to play them, so having pseudo card draw is really, really good at this price point. Shamanic Revelation is going to be great card draw because Bello is going to wake up all of our 4 or more cost enchantments and artifacts, so we're going to get to gain life and draw cards from them. And then Vandal Blast. It's always nice to just wipe all of the stupid Soul Rains and Arcane Signets and all of the artifacts off the board. And this already is a fairly heavy package of stacks. So further staxing our opponents out is what we're looking to do. Instants. Starstorm is a lot like the two we already talked about, like Chain Reaction and Blasphemous Act. This is a good way for us to wipe the board without having to have us lose our own creatures, because on our turn they're all going to be indestructible. Collective Resistance is something that we can kind of dump mana into in the mid to late game. We can destroy an artifact, an enchantment, or give our commander hexproof and indestructible. Our commander is cheap, so if he dies, it's not a big deal. We can afford to cast him again, but ideally we're going to use a spell like this to keep him around, so he's going to be there forever. Heroic Intervention is going to do the exact same thing. Preventing mass enchantment and or artifact removal is going to be important here, so we're going to play an effect like this every time. Return of the Wildspeaker is a good way to overrun our board of enchantments as well as draw cards if we need to. Tamiyo Safekeeping is another way to save our own stuff, as well as Tibalt's Trickery. So this is gonna be more often than not just a quality counterspell. There's gonna be times where your opponent's gonna get something crazy, but it's gonna be few and far between, and it's too consistent at saving our board to not put in here. Valakut Awakening is good card draw, but is also an MDFC that can be a land. So as you can tell, we're playing that and Balaged Recovery. We're only playing 36 actual lands and then 2 MDFCs. So a total land package of 38. I'd call it 37 because I normally count these as halves. Artifacts, we have Chimil, the Inner Sun. It's a 6 mana. Spells you control can't be countered. At the beginning of your end step, discover 5. So it's going to make it impossible for our opponents to interact, and it's also going to get us, and it's an engine piece. It's going to get us value over time. God Pharaoh's Statue, 6 mana. Spells your opponents cast cost 2 more. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses 1 life. Here we're starting to get into the stacks pieces. We're going to be playing a lot of things that make it harder for our opponents to play the game. We're going to minimize the amount of options they have, and we're going to slowly choke everybody out. Ubamask, if a player would draw a card, that player removes it from the game instead, and then they can play the cards removed this turn with Ubamask. So, in a deck like ours, this is not going to change anything. We're basically just going to flip over 4 to 6 mana enchantment, we're going to cast it, and we're going to move on with our day. But for people who like to play more of a controlling style in Commander, if they flip over a counterspell, all of a sudden that counterspell is basically completely useless, and they skipped their card draw for that turn. So this is going to force people to be on the back foot and play more into our game plan and at the speed that we want to play the game. Next, here's our sweet, sweet package of fun enchantments. We want most of our enchantments to be 4 mana or more, so Bello can interact by waking them up and drawing cards and making them indestructible. But there are some 3 mana or less enchantments that were too good not to play. They're still heavy on the stacks theme, as well as drawing cards with all of our Enchantress's effects, such as Verduran, Setessan Champion, Argothian Enchantress, Eidolon of Blossoms. So even though these enchantments aren't going to be woken up and drawing cards through Bello, they're still going to be drawing cards through a lot of these effects. Aether Flash. Whenever a creature comes into play, Aether Flash deals 2 damage to it. So we can get this out mid to late game. Any deck that's playing tokens, they're just going to be killed as soon as they enter the battlefield, or low power creatures. Plus it's going to, again, every time we talk about a 4 mana enchantment, you always have to keep in mind Bello is going to wake it up, make it hasty, indestructible, and draw cards off of it. So not only are these enchantments affecting everybody in different ways and stacking them out, but they're also 4/4 indestructible haste creatures. Aggravated Assault is a good way to close a game out. Chalin specifically said, I want a deck that encourages me to swain every turn. I'm going to encourage you to swain more than once every turn. I'm going to encourage you to swain as much as you possibly can to take opponents out of the game. Bedlam's going to do the same thing. No more blocking. We're here to attack. We're here to take people out. We're not going to hold creatures back for any reason. Berserker's Onslaught, giving our attacking creatures double strike. Blood Moon, non-basic lands or mountains. This is going to just put people out of the game if they're playing too many colors. And if not, it's still going to restrict people and stacks them out. Burning Sands is awesome. When a creature is put into a graveyard from play, that creature's controller sacrifices a land. So, let's imagine a scenario. We have Bello, right? We have a couple enchantments out. We play Burning Sands. The next turn, we have 4 enchantments that get woken up by Bello and are turned into 4/4 indestructible creatures, and we play a chain reaction, and it wipes the board, but we get to keep all of our creatures. Our opponents lose between 3 and 6 creatures, and then they have to sacrifice 3 to 6 lands. This is going to end the game very quickly. Case of the Locked Hothouse, a 4 mana enchantment, so it's already good. Plus it allows us to play additional lands, and it allows us to look at the top card of our library at any time and play lands, cast creatures, and enchantments. It does everything we want. Great engine piece. Defense of the Heart, quietly, a really quality stacks piece. During your upkeep, if one of your opponents controls 3 or more creatures, you get to sack it, and then search for up to 2 creatures and put them directly into play. Enchantress's Presence is another way to draw cards when we're putting enchantments out. Fiery Emancipation is obviously dealing triple damage to a permanent or player. It's going to end the game very quickly. Gratuitous Violence is similar, except it's going to be doubling the damage. Guardian Project does a good job of drawing us cards, being a 4-cost enchantment. Kenris Transformation is a good way to put this on an opponent's commander, so not only does it not go back to the command zone and they can't cast it again, but now it's a useless 3/3 elk. Leyline of Punishment, you get to start with this on the battlefield if it's in your opening hand. Players can't gain life, damage can't be prevented. Again, we're here to do one job, and that's end the game. Mana Reflection typically is going to replace itself by drawing cards when we cast it, as well as doubling our mana, as well as being an indestructible 4/4 haster. Nature's Will is a good way to tap all the lands that a player has and essentially double our mana by untapping all lands we control. Outpost Siege, we are always going to be choosing Khans. It's another good engine piece that's going to be giving us card draw over and over every turn. Rage Reflection is going to give our stuff double strike. Stranglehold, your opponents can't search libraries, and if they begin an extra turn, they skip it instead. Street Riot, it gives our stuff +1/+0 and trample. Going to be surprisingly useful in really gummed up boards when all of a sudden our 4/4 enchantments are now 5/4s haste, indestructible, trample, draw a card when they deal damage. Sylvan Library, I wanted one more piece of card draw. This is the best enchantment card draw you can get. It's going to replace itself because of all our enchantress effects, and even if it doesn't, it's going to draw a ton of cards throughout the game. Be the best version of yourself and always pay the full 8 and draw 3. Unnatural Growth, going to double the power and toughness of our stuff. And then finally, War's Toll. Whenever an opponent taps a land for mana, they tap all the lands they control, and if a creature an opponent controls attacks, all their creatures have to attack. So again, no holding back, no blocking, everything is attacking on everyone's board. Everybody's having to tap all their mana on their turns. Nobody's able to hold up interaction or counter spells. That's the point of the deck. I think this deck came out amazing. The land package, there's nothing crazy to talk about here. I would say Kessig Wolfrun is going to be a cool way to give our enchantments trample. Mosswort Bridge is going to consistently be able to use its hideaway effect because there's going to be a lot of big creatures on the battlefield on our turn. And then finally, Shifting Woodland is a neat way to kind of have this wake up and become something else on the battlefield. So, that's the entire deck. I'm very happy with it. Chalin, I think you're going to like it a lot. This deck is mean. It is powerful. It is, in my opinion, higher tier for sure. I'm not sure you could scale this up much more than what it is right now, but I would only recommend playing this at a higher power table with friends or people that you know personally, because more often than not, people don't like stacks. But if you have a table that you play with often and you're looking for something, a change of pace, highly recommend giving this a try. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, Godspeed.